The sound of shattered crystal echoed through the marble foyer of the Anderson estate, followed by a gasp that seemed to hang in the air longer than physically possible. "Mr. Anderson, I'm so sorry!" Elena Martinez dropped to her knees frantically, gathering the remains of what had been a priceless baccarat vase, a wedding gift to her employer from some European royal whose name she couldn't remember. From the grand staircase, Alexander Anderson observed the scene with an expression that had become his trademark in the business world: impassive, calculating, and entirely unreadable. At 42, the billionaire tech mogul's salt and pepper hair and steel-grey eyes had graced the covers of Fortune and Forbes more times than most celebrities appeared in tabloids. "3 years working in this house," he finally said, his voice quiet, but filling the space as effectively as if he'd shouted. "3 years, and that's the first thing you've broken." Elena looked up, her amber eyes wide with panic. "I'll pay for it, Mr. Anderson. I know it's expensive, but I can set up a payment plan." The laugh that escaped him was so unexpected that Elena nearly dropped the crystal shards she'd collected. She'd worked for Alexander Anderson since his wife Rebecca's death, and in those 3 years she could count on one hand the number of times she'd heard him laugh. "That vase cost more than you'll make in 10 years, Elena." She swallowed hard. 15 monthly installments, then. Another laugh, briefer this time. "Stand up, please." Elena rose to her feet, still clutching the jagged crystal pieces. There was something different about Mr. Anderson today. Something in his eyes that wasn't the usual cold detachment. "I have a proposition for you," he said, descending the remaining stairs with deliberate steps. "If it's about different payment terms for the vase, it's about marriage." Elena froze. "Excuse me?" Alexander Anderson straightened his perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit jacket, a nervous gesture she'd never seen from him before. "My board of directors is concerned about the company's image, specifically my image. A widower CEO who hasn't dated in 3 years apparently projects instability." "With all due respect, sir, your personal life isn't their business," Elena said, before she could stop herself. "Unfortunately, when you're the face of $100 billion company, everything becomes their business." He moved to the antique sideboard and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, despite it being barely past 11 in the morning. "They've given me an ultimatum. Either I show signs of moving on from Rebecca's death, or they'll begin succession planning." Elena carefully placed the broken crystal into a nearby wastebasket. "I still don't understand what this has to do with marriage, or with me." Alexander turned to face her, scotch untouched in his hand. "I need a wife, not a real one, not in the emotional sense. A contractual arrangement. 1 year, public appearances, the appearance of domestic happiness. In return, you'll receive $10 million when the contract ends." The room seemed to tilt beneath Elena's feet. "You want to pay me? To pretend to be your wife?" "I want to offer you a business deal," he corrected. "You're intelligent, presentable, and most importantly, you already know my habits and preferences. Training someone new would be inefficient." Elena couldn't help it. A burst of laughter escaped her lips. "Training? Mr. Anderson, you make it sound like you're adopting a puppy, not proposing a fake marriage." For a moment she thought she'd gone too far, crossed the employer-employee line that had always been so clearly drawn. But instead of anger, she saw something rare flicker across his face: uncertainty. "I apologize for my choice of words," he said stiffly. "The point remains, this would be mutually beneficial. You told me once that your mother needs specialized medical care you can't afford. This would solve that problem, and several others, I imagine." Elena's laughter died in
her throat.
Her mother's Parkinson's treatment, the experimental program in Switzerland that could potentially reverse some of her symptoms, would cost almost exactly what he was offering. Why not hire an actress or date someone from your social circle? She asked. Alexander's jaw tightened. I need someone discreet, someone who understands confidentiality. And quite frankly, I don't have the patience to court someone from what you call my social circle. So instead, you're offering a business transaction to your housekeeper. Eleanor felt a strange mixture of insult and fascination. My housekeeper, who has a master's degree in comparative literature, speaks 4 languages, and who I've seen reading Proust in the original French during her lunch breaks. Alexander set down his untouched scotch. I'm not asking because you're conveniently located, Elena. I'm asking because in 3 years, you're the only person I've met who I think I could tolerate sharing a living space with for 12 months. Coming from Alexander Anderson, that was practically a sonnet. What would this involve exactly? Elena heard herself asking, even as her rational mind screamed that she should run from the room. A legal contract outlining all expectations, public appearances as a couple. You would move into the main house. I already live in the main house, she interrupted. Not in the staff quarters, he clarified. You would have to take on the role of my wife in every public-facing aspect. Including? She left the question hanging, heat rising to her cheeks. Alexander's expression remained businesslike. There would be no physical component to our arrangement if that's what you're asking. Though public displays of affection might occasionally be necessary for appearances. A crash from the kitchen saved Elena from having to respond immediately. Mrs. Winters, the elderly cook, had likely dropped something again. Her arthritis was getting worse. I don't expect an answer right away, Alexander said, checking his watch. I have meetings all afternoon. Take the day to think about it. The contract draft is on your desk. He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway to his study. And Elena? The vase was hideous. Rebecca hated it. I've been looking for an excuse to get rid of it for years. With that, he disappeared behind heavy mahogany doors, leaving Elena standing in the foyer, surrounded by crystal shards and life-changing possibilities. She stood there for a long moment, then shook her head and whispered to herself, $10 million to marry the most infuriating man I've ever met. What could possibly go wrong? In the distance, thunder rolled across the Seattle skyline, as if the universe itself was laughing at her question. Elena stared at the contract on her desk, a substantial document bound in leather that seemed to mock her with its very existence. Through the bay window of her modest staff quarters, she could see the Seattle skyline glittering against the night, the headquarters of Anderson Technologies dominating the view with its distinctive A-shaped architecture. This is insane, she muttered to herself, flipping to page 23 of the contract. Public displays of affection shall be limited to hand-holding, brief kisses, and socially appropriate embraces. She snorted. As if anything about this is socially appropriate. Her phone buzzed with an incoming video call. The familiar face of her best friend, Matteo, appeared on screen. So did your billionaire boss propose yet? He joked, a running gag between them, ever since Elena had described Alexander as Darcy with tech stocks instead of an estate. Elena's silence was answer enough. Matteo's eyes widened. Holy shit, he did? I was kidding. It's not a real proposal, Elena clarified, turning the phone to show him the contract. It's a business arrangement. $10 million to pretend to be Mrs. Alexander Anderson for 1 year. $10 million? Matteo enunciated each word as if it were its own sentence. Girl, you could buy a private island with that. Or pay for Mum's treatment program with enough left over to secure her care for life, Elena said softly. Matteo's expression sobered. How is she? The same. Some days better than others. Elena ran a hand through her dark curls. The doctors say this program could give her back years of quality life. Then what's stopping you from signing? Matteo asked. Besides the fact that your boss has the emotional range of a teaspoon. Elena laughed despite herself. I don't know. Maybe because marriage, even a fake one, should mean something. Or because I'd be lying to everyone I know. Or possibly because Alexander Anderson treats emotions like they're a communicable disease he might catch if he stands too close. Fair points, Matteo conceded. But consider this, $10 million. You're not helping. I'm being practical. What's 1 year of your life for financial security forever? Elena's gaze drifted to the photo on her nightstand. Her mother before the Parkinson's had taken its toll, vibrant and laughing on a beach in Puerto Rico. What wouldn't she give to see her mother laugh like that again? I should sleep on it, she said, not convincing even herself. You should sign it before he comes to his senses, Matteo countered. Besides, the man's not exactly hard on the eyes. Matteo? What? I'm just saying, some people pay for that kind of view. You're getting paid. After hanging up, Elena changed into her pajamas and climbed into bed, but sleep eluded her. The contract sat on her desk like Schrödinger's cat, both signed and unsigned in her mind as she weighed her options. At 3:17 a.m. she gave up, threw on a cardigan over her pajamas, and padded barefoot through the silent mansion to the kitchen for some tea. She nearly jumped out of her skin when she flicked on the light to find Alexander sitting at the kitchen island, laptop open, still in his dress shirt from earlier, though the sleeves were now rolled up to reveal surprisingly muscular forearms. Jesus, she gasped, clutching her chest. Do you just lurk in dark rooms waiting to give people heart attacks? One corner of his mouth lifted slightly, the closest thing to a smile she typically saw from him. Insomnia, he explained. I find it's more productive than lying awake. Elena moved to the kettle, filling it with water. Tea? He nodded, closing his laptop. You're up late. Someone left a marriage contract on my desk. It's surprisingly effective at preventing sleep. He drummed his fingers once on the marble countertop. Another rare display of nervousness. Questions? Elena turned to face him, leaning against the counter. About 100. I have time. She chose her words carefully. Why me, really? And don't say it's because I read Proust. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes studying her with an intensity that made her wish she'd thrown on more than just the thin cardigan over her pajama set. My wife had a theory about people, he finally said. She believed there were two types, those who move through the world like they own it, and those who move through it like they're trying to leave it better than they found it. You're the second kind. The unexpected sincerity in his voice caught Elena off guard. That doesn't explain why you'd want to fake marry me, doesn't it? Alexander accepted the mug of tea she handed him. Rebecca was the heart of our public image. After she died, I didn't care about maintaining it. Now I have to, but I won't dishonor her memory with someone who represents everything she wasn't. Elena perched on a stool across from him. So I'm, what, the anti-gold digger option? You're the option who didn't ask about the money first, he said simply. You asked about the why. The kitchen fell silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sip of tea. I have conditions, Elena finally said. Alexander's eyebrows rose. Beyond what's in the contract. 3 non-negotiable terms. She ticked them off on her fingers. First, my mother's medical care starts immediately, not after the year is up. Second, I want it in writing that Mrs. Winters and the rest of the staff keep their jobs regardless of how this arrangement ends. And third, she hesitated. Third, he prompted. Third, you have to dance with me at least once at every event we attend. Now it was Alexander's turn to look surprised. Dance? That's your third condition? Elena lifted her chin. You move through social events like you're navigating a minefield. If we're going to sell this as real, you need to look at me at least once per event like I'm the reason stars shine. Dancing helps. Alexander set down his mug, studying her with newfound curiosity. That's surprisingly strategic. I didn't get a master's degree by being pretty, she retorted. For the third time that day, Alexander Anderson laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face completely. No, I suppose you didn't. He extended his hand across the island. Do we have a deal, Ms. Martinez? Eleanor hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. His palm was warm and surprisingly calloused for a tech CEO. Deal, Mr. Anderson. You should probably start calling me Alex, he said, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. Alex, she repeated, testing the shortened name that humanized the billionaire. And you should know that I sleep with socks on and hog the covers. His eyes widened slightly before he caught the teasing glint in her eye. I'll make a note in the contract. See that you do, she said with mock seriousness, then added, also I signed it already. It's on your desk. Alexander, Alex, looked genuinely surprised. When? About 20 minutes before I came down here, she admitted. Turns out there's not much I wouldn't do for my mother, or Mrs. Winters, for that matter. I'll have my lawyers add your conditions in the morning. He stood, gathering his laptop. We should announce our engagement by the end of the week. I'll have a ring delivered tomorrow. No, Elena said firmly. Alex frowned. No? If we're doing this, we're doing it properly. You don't get to hide behind assistants and deliveries. You buy the ring yourself, and you propose properly on one knee and everything. That wasn't in the contract, he pointed out. Consider it a verbal addendum. Elena rinsed her mug in the sink. If we're going to lie to the world, we should at least be convincing about it. As she turned to leave the kitchen, Alex called after her. Elena, thank you. She paused at the doorway, looking back at the man who was now, by contractual agreement, her fiancé. Don't thank me yet, Alex. You haven't seen me try to walk in heels. The next morning, Elena awoke to find a note slipped under her door. In Alexander's precise handwriting, it read, Clear your schedule for the weekend. We're going ring shopping, and dancing lessons start Tuesday. A. Beneath it was a business card for Seattle's most exclusive jewelry store with an appointment time written on the back. He'd added a postscript. I already know your ring size, benefits of being observant. Elena wasn't sure whether to be impressed or unnerved. Probably both. A combination she suspected she'd better get used to as the future Mrs. Alexander Anderson contractual edition. 6 months into their contractual marriage, Elena found herself standing on the balcony of the Anderson Technologies headquarters, watching Seattle's annual charity gala unfold 40 floors below. The city sparkled beneath her, but it couldn't compete with the brilliance of the 5-carat diamond on her left hand, a ring Alexander had indeed selected himself after vetoing the first 17 she'd tried on. Too ostentatious, he'd said of a princess cut. Too predictable about a classic solitaire. When she'd slipped on the vintage emerald-cut diamond with small sapphire accents, however, his expression had changed. "That one," he'd said quietly. "It reminds me of starlight." The memory made her smile now as she twisted the ring around her finger, a nervous habit she'd developed. From inside the penthouse venue, the sounds of Seattle's elite mingling over champagne and charitable donations drifted through the open doors. "Hiding from your adoring public?" The familiar voice sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. Reaction she'd been fighting with increasing difficulty. Alex joined her at the railing, handing her a flute of champagne. In the 6 months of their arrangement, subtle changes had transformed him from the cold, detached billionaire into someone almost approachable. He smiled more. He'd started leaving his home office before midnight. Last week he'd even laughed at a romantic comedy they'd watched, a sound so surprising that Elena had nearly spilled popcorn across the media room's custom leather seating. "Not hiding," she corrected. "Strategic retreat. If one more society matron asks when we're planning to have children, I might say something unfortunate about surrogacy and artificial intelligence." Alex choked slightly on his champagne. "Please don't. The board is just starting to relax about my stability as CEO." "Your stability is up 12 points since our wedding, according to that investor confidence report." Elena clinked her glass against his. "You're welcome." Their wedding had been an intimate affair 3 months earlier, small by billionaire standards, but still featured in Vogue. They'd exchanged vows on Alexander's private island, surrounded by a carefully curated guest list of 50 people, most of whom Elena had never met before. Her mother had attended in a wheelchair, her condition already showing improvement from the advanced treatments she'd started. The only real moment during the elaborate fake ceremony had been Elena's tearful embrace with her mother after the vows. "Be happy, Mia," her mother had whispered. "Contract or no contract." "The board is impressed with more than just me," Alex said, interrupting her thoughts. "Your foundation is the talk of the corporate world." The Elena Anderson Foundation for Medical Innovation, her one condition when Alex had insisted on a prenuptial agreement that would leave her with significantly more than their originally agreed-upon sum. The foundation had already funded 3 promising research initiatives for degenerative neurological conditions. "It helps to have a last name that opens doors," she admitted. "It's not the name, it's how you've used it." There was something in his voice, pride, perhaps, that made her look up at him. In the moonlight, with the city glittering below them, Alexander Anderson looked different from the man who had proposed a business arrangement in his marble foyer. The perpetual furrow between his brows had softened. The lines around his mouth now showed evidence of smiles rather than frowns. "We should go back inside," Elena said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "You promised me a dance, remember? Condition number 3? Alex set down his champagne glass. "Actually, I think the music's perfect right here." Before she could respond, he took her glass, placed it beside his on the small balcony table, and drew her into his arms. There was no music except the distant sounds of the orchestra playing inside, but he guided her into a slow sway, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. "Mrs. Winters asked when you'd be moving your things. Into the master bedroom," he said, conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. Elena missed a step. "She what?" "Apparently our sleeping arrangements have become a matter of staff speculation. Mrs. Winters thinks it's odd that we maintain separate bedrooms 6 months into our marriage." "Our marriage contract specifically stipulates separate sleeping." "Quarters," Elena reminded him. Her cheeks had grown warm, and she blamed it on the champagne. "True. Alex guided her into a gentle turn. Though it's becoming increasingly difficult to explain why I should sleep alone when my wife is just down the hall. Eleanor's heart performed an Olympic-worthy gymnastics routine. Alex, I've been thinking about amending our contract, he continued, his voice so close to her ear that she could feel his breath. Amending how? She managed to ask, though her voice sounded strange even to herself. He drew back enough to look at her, really look at her, with an intensity that made her forget they were standing on a balcony 40 floors above Seattle, with 300 of the city's wealthiest residents just inside. I'd like to remove the expiration date, he said simply. Elena stopped dancing. What? I think I've been very patient these past 6 months, Alex continued, maintaining his hold on her waist. I've attended charity functions without complaint. I've endured your terrible taste in movies. Hey, and I've even eaten that vegetarian lasagna you insist is just as good as the real thing, which it decidedly is not. His eyes softened. But I'm finding it increasingly difficult to maintain the pretense that this is just a business arrangement. Eleanor's mouth had gone dry. What are you saying? I'm saying that I'm in love with you, Elena. The words hung in the air between them, as delicate and explosive as nitroglycerin. And I hope, that you might feel something for me too. For a woman with a master's degree in literature, Elena suddenly found herself with a vocabulary consisting entirely of single-syllable words. Oh, Alexander's face, which had been more open than she'd ever seen it, began to close off again, the familiar mask of the untouchable CEO sliding back into place. I apologize for misreading the situation. He began to step away, but Elena grabbed his lapels, preventing his retreat. Don't you dare walk away after dropping a bombshell like that, Alexander Anderson. His eyebrows rose at her vehemence. I was trying to give you space. I don't want space. I've had nothing but space for 6 months while I've been falling. In love with a man I'm contractually obligated not to fall in love with. The words escaped before she could stop them, and for a moment they both stood frozen, her hands still clutching his custom Tom Ford jacket. You love me? He asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Of course I love you, you impossible man. Elena released his lapels to gesture expansively. Why else would I rearrange your calendar so you actually sleep? Or convince Mrs. Winters to sneak vegetables into your meals? Or endure your mother's not-so-subtle hints about grandchildren? Alexander's face transformed with a slow smile that reached all the way to his eyes. I thought that was just part of your thoroughness in fulfilling our contract. Well, you thought wrong, she retorted, and for a genius tech CEO, you can be remarkably dense about interpersonal relationships. He laughed then, a full, uninhibited, sound that she'd gone from hearing never to hearing daily. So I've been told, repeatedly, by you. Before she could formulate a suitably witty response, Alexander closed the distance between them, cradling her face in his hands with a tenderness that made her heart constrict. Elena Anderson, he said softly, would you consider making our temporary arrangement permanent? No contracts, no terms, no expiration dates, just us, figuring it out as we go. She pretended to consider it, tapping her chin thoughtfully. I don't know. Does this mean I have to give back the $10 million? He laughed again. Keep it. Consider it an incredibly elaborate first date expense. The most expensive first date in history, she mused. I suppose that means you're stuck with me. You can't afford to date anyone else. Alexander's expression grew serious, though his eyes remained warm. I don't want anyone else. I never have. from the moment you walked into my office for your interview and corrected my Latin quotation." "It was conjugated wrong," Elena protested. "It was a test," he admitted. "No one else had ever had the courage to correct me." Elena shook her head in disbelief. "You are the most infuriating." He cut her off with a kiss, not the polite, public kisses they'd shared for photographs and appearances, but a real one. A kiss that spoke of nights lying awake, thinking of each other, of glances stolen across rooms, of feelings developing despite the contractual terms explicitly forbidding them. When they finally broke apart, breathless, the sounds of the gala inside seemed to have faded away entirely. "I think we just violated Section 16, Paragraph 4 of our marriage contract," Elena murmured against his lips. "Sue me," Alexander replied, pulling her closer. "I have excellent lawyers." "I have a better idea," she said, looping her arms around his neck. "How about we go home and start negotiating the terms of our real marriage? I have some very specific clauses I'd like to add to the bedroom arrangement section." Alexander's eyes darkened. "I've created a monster." "No, you married one. There's a difference." Elena smiled up at him. "So what do you say, Mr. Anderson? Ready to tear up that contract and start something real?" In answer, Alexander swept her into his arms, literally, and carried her toward the door. "Put me down!" she laughed, though she made no real effort to escape. "There are photographers in there." "Good," he said, pausing at the threshold. "Let them see that Alexander Anderson is madly in love with his wife. It's about time the world knew." As they re-entered the gala to gasps and camera flashes, Elena laid her head against his shoulder and whispered, "For the record, I would have done it all for free." Alexander kissed her forehead and murmured back, "For the record, you're still getting the money. And the house in Tuscany I bought you as a real wedding present." "You did what?" Elena pulled back to look at him. "Surprise," he said with a grin. "Turns out, once you start feeling emotions again, they're rather difficult to stop." 6 months later, Elena and Alexander welcomed guests to the grand opening of the Martinez Anderson Neurological Center, with Elena's mother, now walking, with only the assistance of a cane, cutting the ribbon. As photographers captured the moment, Alexander wrapped his arm around his wife's waist and whispered in her ear, "Best contract I ever signed." Elena leaned into him, her fake husband, turned real, and replied, "Best contract you ever broke." And as they smiled for the cameras, neither one of them was acting anymore.